I'm gonna bet that you never wondered how your photos would look like if you edited them based on a study from 1959. And I'm gonna be honest, neither did I until a few days ago when I stumbled upon a paper that Kodak commissioned in 1959 to verify if humans actually remember colors the way they are, or if we shift the hues around in our memories. The paper is called Memory Colors of Familiar Object and it was published in the Journal of Optical Society of America in January 1960. In this study, they placed around 900 color samples in a neutral gray room and asked people to pick from those the color of a red brick, green grass, blue sky, our skin tone, and a few other things that we encounter on a day-by-day basis. And turns out that our memories are more saturated than our reality, and also we're moving some hues around to fit our narrative. Like the red brick, which seems to be remembered way much redder than it actually is, or the fact that we remember the sky as being cyan instead of pure blue, and our skin tone is usually remembered as being a bit more yellowish. And also we remember the green of nature as being tilted slightly towards blue and not those yellow tones that usually mess around our edits. So now let's go to Lightroom, and in here I want to edit a few photos from start to finish so you can see my editing process, but also edit with all that information in mind to see how my colors will end up looking. But before I do that, give me 1 second to introduce myself to the new people in the audience. Hi, my name is Vlad. I'm a portrait photographer who specializes in Lightroom workflows and advanced tricks in Lightroom so I can avoid going to Photoshop for basic editing needs. This way, I ended up developing quite a few tools and presets for Lightroom that you can find on my website, and I also started this YouTube channel where I talk about in-depth editing tricks. Now, let's go back to editing. And I'm gonna start by switching this photo to my false color camera profile so I can have a better understanding of the exposure in the photo. Right out of the gate, I can notice a problem with a reverse vignetting going on at the bottom part of my photo. So I'm gonna quickly grab a radial gradient mask and I'll make it pretty big and invert it so it's only affecting this bottom part of the image, and in here I'm going to push down the exposure just enough to get rid of those corners which were brighter than the surrounding areas. And with that out of the way, I can toggle off the masking and focus on the exposure in the photo. Most of the photo right now is underexposed, and we can see this because the tones in the false color are all cold tones except for this little part right here. So what I want to do is bring up the exposure throughout the entire photo just a bit until I start to see neutral gray here on the clouds. And now I'm going to push up my black level a bit and push down the highlights a bit as well to get rid of the contrast in the photo. Let's switch back to the GoPro camera profile, and I can still feel that the photo is pretty dark. So I'm going to push my shadows up, but whenever I'm playing with shadows, I try to be rather conservative because if we push the shadows too far, we're getting this HDR look, and this is not something that Kodak would like in 1959. But with that joke out of the way, all I've done so far is take my raw data and get as much out of it as possible without making the photo look HDR. I was looking for deep dark shadows and nice bright highlights, but without overexposure and without that HDR look that we don't really like over here. Now, let's go back in the photo, and I want to talk about color because getting a good white balance is also very important before we start editing. So I'm pushing both vibrance and saturation 100%, and we can see that our shadows are pretty blue and our highlights are warm. That's exactly where we want them to be, but I still think that I can push my white balance just a little bit more to the right, and I'm generally looking over here on the clouds where you can see that the highlights in the photo are warm and the shadows are blue. I want that transition to be there, and I also noticed when I zoomed in that the entire photo is a bit greenish, so I'm also going to push just a little bit the tint towards magenta. And now I can pull back the vibrance and saturation of the photo, and you can see that it's even more neutral than it was before. But since the study found out that we remember stuff as being way more saturated than they actually are, I'm gonna push a bit of saturation, probably up to 20 or something across the entire photo. And then I'm going to go to masking, create a new mask, luminance range mask, and I'm going to add a lot more saturation in my midtones to mimic the way film actually saturates, because at the end of the day, I'm gonna try and get this edit to emulate the look of film in honor of Kodak. And with that luminance range mask, I'm pushing saturation hard in my midtones so I can still have a very rich looking photo without oversaturating the highlights. Because if I would be to push the saturation with the global slider, you can see how the highlights around the sky and especially here right next to the sunset were getting oversaturated fast. But if you want to see more about how saturation behaves in Lightroom, because there are 5 different ways and they all work slightly different, check out this video right here after you're done with this one. And now let's do the color shifting that they noticed in the study, and I'm gonna be using the mixer or the HSL panel for that. I'm gonna start by pushing orange towards yellow because they learned that we perceive, or better yet, remember that vegetation as being way more yellow than it actually is. So I'm pushing orange towards yellow, and I'm also going to increase the saturation and the luminance of the orange channel. Next up, I want to target the sky that we seemingly remember as being a lot more cyan than it actually is. And for that, I'm pushing the hue to the left, the saturation up just a tiny bit in both aqua and blue channels, and I'm going to decrease the luminance of the blue because this way we can get a denser blue in the sky. For the greens, I'm going to push the green to the right, although we don't have much of green or alive vegetation in this photo. And I'm also going to push the red and the yellow slightly to the right just to maintain a somewhat smooth line over here because I don't want to create banding. And generally, when playing around with the mixer or the HSL panel, you want to avoid bands that are next to each other pushed really far apart, because this way we can break our images and create zones of transitions that are really harsh. So overall, after a bit of fine tuning, my settings look something like this. For this specific image, and because I have this purple flare over here, I think I might want to push the purple to the left and magenta as well, but this is rather super specific to this one image. But except for those things with the purple channel, if you want to copy the settings, pause the video right now. And if you did that, now let's compare the photo that I have at the moment with the look that the image had before I started playing around with the colors. And right out of the gate, I can see that I messed something up in the saturation of the aqua or the blue channel because my edit has this weird band over here that's oversaturated. But apart from that, I really like the tones in the photo, and surprisingly, they feel more like what I experienced in the moment. And although I have to admit that it's probably not that close to reality, I really enjoyed that look. But I want to take it one step further, and I'm going to combine this with a Kodak Gold 200 color response curve from my pack. You see that the photo got instantly warmer. That's because Kodak 200 is usually warm, and the tones in the photo got a lot more cyan or aqua, especially the blue tones over here. And I think that just like that, the photo looks a lot better and a lot more Kodak, if you wish. And after doing this, I think I have to do a few more tweaks today. I'm gonna start with a radial gradient, where I'm gonna apply the tonal contrast method that I showed in a previous video to increase the contrast in the clouds. I'm picking a point in the highlights and one in the shadows, and I'm gonna apply just a little bit more contrast in that area over there to make the focal point of the image, because afterwards, that's the entire reason why I went up there. I wanted to see the sea of clouds. And also, I want to apply some grain to the image to make it look even more nostalgic. So I'm going to use my all-in-one grain preset. I'm going for the version 800, which simulate the amount of grain you would get on ISO 800 film, but I want to tweak it a bit to make it just a tiny bit softer, and I'm decreasing the roughness and the size of the grain. And while I could probably fine-tune this image and make it look even better, especially without the blue filming lights on, which are messing up my perception of color, I really enjoyed the fact that with a few simple sliders, I was able to get a much pleasant look out of my file in just a few minutes. And honestly, editing my photos based on a study from 1959 is not something that I ever thought I would do. But I also edited a few other images with the same concepts in mind, and I have to say the resulting images are impressive. Although they never look that natural, they look pleasant to the eye, and one could believe that this is how you remember a place or a moment. So Kodak really knew what they were doing when they developed their films based on this study back in 1960. But one thing that I don't really love about all this is that it kinda locks you in the orange cyan look that not everybody loves. But overall, I think this is something that's worth trying out, and if you do, let me know how it works for you in the comments down below. And maybe also talk about some zoo animals or something to confuse people that didn't watch the entire video. That was it for today. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you'll feel like you learned something, and if you did, make sure to hit subscribe. And don't forget to check out my website, because there you'll find a ton of Lightroom tools and presets that can help you take your editing to the next level. And if you buy any of them, you're also supporting me and the work that I do on this channel, so I can keep doing what I love.